Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 103. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we have a Hoenn focused team. Now Hoenn does have quite a few standout picks, mostly because of Mega Evolutions and the fact that the entirety of Oraz was kind of built around Mega Evolutions. But those Mega Evolutions somewhat caused this generation to feel kind of lacking in later competitive generations, just because the way that they rebalanced the Pokemon was by giving them Mega Evolutions, and not a lot of them feel like they've really been given a buff after that. And there are exceptions that apply, such as like Sceptile getting Shed Tail. But more or less, I feel like Gen 3 has to rely on some of its kind of hidden gems or support Pokemon, so by starting off, we're going with the Pokemon that is definitely not a support Pokemon, and we're going to talk about Hariyama once again. We're going to be doing Hariyama with the Fake Out since we're in double, such a great support move, and then we have the Drain Punch in order to try and keep ourselves alive, and also to negate the burn damage that we are taking from our Flame Orb Guts in order to increase the damage that we do, and also the Flame Orb makes it so that whenever we burn ourselves, we don't have to worry about any other statuses affecting Hariyama. And then we also just have Ice Punch slotted on Hariyama because I wanted to use Hariyama to try and beat the types that we don't super beat with this team, like Crawdaunt, fears the grass types, so we can hit them with an ice type move, and Metagross kind of fears the ground types, and we can hit those with an ice type move, and hopefully it works out. And we also have the Wide Guard on Hariyama just to make it so that we are not taking too much spread damage on this team, or at least while we have Hariyama on the field. And I gave Hariyama a Terra Flying just so it can dodge a move that is the core part of the strategy that is the entire way at the end of this team, and kind of what this team is based upon. It's a real important pillar of this team. We're Terra Flying so that we can dodge a ground type move if we don't want to have to go for the Wide Guard to dodge it, but you'll see. Next up we have Sableye, and Sableye is going to be a big support mon as it is a prankster Pokemon, which means that all of our status moves are going to have priority, and we have 3 status moves in the Rain Dance in order to set Rain to increase Crawdaunt's water type damage, but also to reduce the fire type damage for basically everything on the team except for our water type and our dragon type. And we also have the dual screens and light clay in order to make it so that we are very tanky on both the special or physical side depending on what we need, because this team enjoys really sitting behind the screens and just soaking up not too much damage and then dealing a lot of damage back. And then we also have the Foul Play slotted on Sableye just so Sableye has a little bit of chip damage, and it is stab too, so you can get off some pretty big Foul Play damage into Pokemon that are perhaps not expecting it. And Dark is just such a good type for support Pokemon that it makes a lot of sense to be Terra Dark, and it also boosts the power of our Foul Play. Next up we have Illumise, our second prankster Pokemon, and you normally don't see a lot of double prankster Pokemon. However, Sableye and Illumise are both pretty different from each other because they can both avoid the Fake Out, but Sableye does it because of its typing, and Illumise does it because of its item. And of course, Sableye is not able to Tailwind, and we want to Tailwind with Illumise in order to make some of our slower Pokemon a bit faster. The most notable ones being Hariyama, Crawdaunt, and Metagross are not specifically designed with speed in mind, but we do have another form of speed control on this team that we'll get onto later. We also have the ability to Encore Lock the opponent into moves in case they decide to go for Fake Out into us, and we have the Thunder Wave just as another form of speed control. But if we also want to activate Hariyama's Guts on the first turn and make Hariyama slower in case we're going up against the Trick Room team, we can side Thunder Wave the Hariyama to paralyze it instead of burn it, and then we risk paralyzing ourselves whenever Hariyama uses a move, but Hariyama will be slower, and it gets the first turn Guts activation for its Drain Punch or its Ice Punch, which can come up in some scenarios. Next up we have Crawdaunt, and Crawdaunt is an interesting water type to have in this format just because it is water dark, and we are a physical attacker, which is a lot of Pokemon can fulfill that role, but not so much the dark type role and water both together unless you're running physical Greninja, which you're kind of frail, maybe not as frail as Crawdaunt here, but still pretty frail. But our Crawdaunt having adaptability means that we can do more
damage than most water-type Pokemon, unless your name is Basculegion. But Crawdon is here to hopefully specifically counter Pokemon like Basculegion that require the use of their water or ghost-type moves, as we can hit them super effectively with the Dark Crunch, and then we have the Aqua Jet and the Crab Hammer as both of our water-type moves, one for a little bit of priority, and one for just the big Crab Hammer damage that comes along with us being a crab. And we are Focus Sash on Crawdon just so that we can always take at least one hit with Crawdon, and we're Terra Water just because we want to even further boost the water type damage that we're dealing. Next up, we're slotting on Salamence here, big pseudo of the, well, actually 2 pseudos of the region. But our Salamence is going to be a special Salamence, and with special Salamence we can make use of Draco Meteor for that one big hit KO. And we also have the Hurricane. Since we are a rain team, we can make it so that our Hurricanes are 100% accurate and never miss. But for the cases that we're not setting up rain, we do have the Flamethrower and Terra Fire in order to hit back with a lot of big fire-type damage. And we also have the option to go for Bulldoze on Salamence, which will allow us to have a form of speed control where we can use it to not only break the opponent's Focus Sashes, but also to drop their speed. And as we'll discuss with Metagross here, Metagross is Clear Body, which means that it will not have its speed stat dropped whenever Salamence goes for the Bulldoze, and it will activate our weakness policy because both our normal type and our Terra type are weak to ground. So ideally we deal a very minimal amount of damage to ourselves with Salamence's super fast Bulldoze. We get off the weakness policy, the opponent's Pokemon are both slower than Metagross, and Metagross is able to get a 2x hit with either Meteor Mash or Psychic Fangs as its 2 stab moves, or we can go for the Earthquake. Since Salamence is a flying type, we can immediately go for that Earthquake into the Pokemon, and Hariyama has the Wide Guard in order to dodge either the Bulldoze or the Earthquake from Metagross. So it's a pretty high risk, high reward strategy, but whenever you get off the weakness policy, you can just basically KO anything you want with Metagross. It's just about having that speed control in order to be able to KO things. Hence why we have Sableye to make everything tankier so that we can get off our big damage, and why we have Illumise for even more speed control. Also, if we're really down on our luck, we can lead something like Crawdon and Metagross and go Terra Fire and then side Aqua Jet into Metagross. I'm not sure how much damage that does. I'd have to imagine it does like 40% to Metagross if I had to guess. And if you don't have any speed control set up, then both of your Pokemon, except for Crawdon, because Crawdon's going for priority, but Metagross is still probably going to be slower than your opposing Pokemon, so that's not exactly a great idea, but it does come up. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a Smeargle Muck team, which is definitely a lead that we have to be aware of, but they also have the Murkrow Basculegion mode, so it's kind of precarious if we decide to set up our rain while Basculegion is on the field, because it definitely has this sweeping potential to go through us. The battle starts, and we lead Salamence and Illumise here, as the opponent leads Smeargle and Muck. And I don't actually think Illumise was a great lead here, as it probably would have been better to try and get Smeargle out of the way, like, immediately, but the main reason that I let Illumise is because I wanted to set up the rain before Basculegion gets on the field, and also the rain makes it so that our Hurricane is 100% accurate for when Muck does what it just did, which is going for the Minimize, and we try to Encore the Smeargle into its Fake Out, but we instead Encore into Follow Me. As the Muck gets a good amount of damage considering that it's intimidated off on its knockoff into Salamence, but now Salamence is no longer locked into one move, and we Hurricane into Smeargle as it redirects the move, and Muck picks up the Moody, and Muck gets off another Minimize there. Kind of luckily for Muck, it gets an immediate attack boost into a special attack drop, which is one of the best things that you want if you're a Muck. But they bring in Flamigo, and Flamigo also gets to get that attack boost. So we need to Hurricane away that Flamigo immediately, and we try Meteor Mashing, but Muck is able to dodge it. And Muck gets the knockoff into Metagross, but Metagross is just barely able to survive it, and that also activates Metagross's weakness policy. Of course, Basculegion comes onto the field, and it's kind of likely that Basculegion has Aqua Jet, and we protect for that specific reason. And we do get some good Hurricane damage into their Muck as they knock off into Salamence again, but now we are outside rain, so Basculegion is going to be a little bit slower and not dealing as much water type damage. They do Aqua Jet into Metagross here, but we land the Draco Meteor that we needed to into Muck, thankfully, and now we have 3 Pokemon in order to try and take out this Basculegion here, with one of them being a Crawdon, and it seems like Basculegion is locked into a Aqua Jet, so we get the paralysis onto Basculegion, and Crawdon is able to finish up the game. We have a chestnut grassy terrain team with firewater grass and the 2 grass types and Palafin and Incineroar, but they also have the option to go for a Trick Room mode with their Blood Moon Ursaluna. So the battle starts out and we lead Sableye and Salamence here as they lead Incineroar and Farigiraf, which is not great for us because we really can't pressure the Trick Room too efficiently here as they can just fake out into Salamence as we try to foul play into Farigiraf, but they are intimidated so the attack on the Farigiraf is lower. They go for the Hyper Voice just to chip Salamence, but that also gets off their Throat Spray, and they parting shot out Salamence in order to reduce its damage to bring in Ursaluna, but Ursaluna takes a pretty good amount from the Draco Meteor there, and we have a light screen, so I decided to swap in Metagross there to try and save Salamence, as they would never go for Earth Power into Salamence, and we resist, and we have the light screen up, so the Blood Moon doesn't do too much damage to Metagross there, and Sableye just gets to Foul Play chip the Ursaluna a bit. Incineroar returns to the field, maybe looking for a fake out, but also Farigiraf didn't really have much to do there with a Steel type and a Ghost type on the field. We foul played chip there Ursaluna as we protect with Metagross to avoid the Earth Power, and we can either sack Salamence here as the opponent just decides to Blood Moon away our Sableye, but the Life Orb damage causes them to lose Ursaluna, which is the big deal there. We get knocked off on Salamence, so Salamence is no longer locked into a move, and it is slower, but they bring Rillaboom to the field here, and they get fake out into Salamence, and they try to knock off Metagross, but Metagross at least gets some grassy terrain healing there. And we go for the Bulldoze in order to lower both the opposing Pokemon's speed, and we get the weakness policy activation on Metagross, and Metagross is just able to KO Rillaboom, putting us in a pretty good spot for the endgame here. And since Metagross didn't have an item, the knockoff from Incineroar did less, and we Draco with the Farigiraf, and we Earthquake, which is going to do super effective damage to Incineroar and take out Farigiraf. Even though we're on grassy terrain, the Earthquake's power was reduced. It still did really good chip damage to both, and Crawdont once again coming in the back and able to use the Terastallization Aqua Jet just to end the game. Another thing that I wanted to note is that maybe on the turn previously where I caught the knockoff on Metagross, I think it would have been better if I Terra-Fired Metagross on that turn, because we would still be weak to the Bulldoze, so the weakness policy would proc. But then if the Incineroar went for Flare Blitz into us, Flare Blitz would have done more damage than the knockoff and probably knocked us out, so I think I should have Terra-Fired on that turn in order to guarantee win the game. Lastly, we have a battle against a tanky snow team where they don't have any other ice types other than Ninetales to benefit from the snow. It's just that all these Pokemon want to sit on the field and either stat boost and try to get off some damage, or just take damage like Annihilate and then dish back the damage once your Rage Fist stacks are up. So we just flat out lead Salamence and Metagross here in order to get off the strategy, as they lead Dragonite and Primarina, and we get the Intimidate down into Dragonite, which means that's not inner focus, and we get off the Bulldoze in order to slow Primarina and also to get the weakness policy on Metagross, and they flat out just decide to Tailwind and then go for the Moon Blast into Salamence. So we lose Salamence, but we take out their Primarina, and now their Goldengo comes onto the field, and I protect with Metagross and Encore the Dragonite into Tailwind so that it can't do anything else, as Metagross just catches the Shadow Ball, and now Annihilate comes onto the field since that Dragonite was just useless, and we set up our own Tailwind in order to stagger Tailwinds, and we go for the Earthquake with Metagross to deal super effective damage to Goldengo, but also just in case they decide to swap out Dragonite, which they did, we get some good damage into whatever Dragonite swapped into. And Illumise is a bug type, so it takes resisted damage from the Earthquake, which is another benefit of using Illumise as our Prankster Tailwind Mon. We try to Thunder Wave into Annihilate, but unfortunately Annihilate dodges it, which means that it gets to protect pretty safely on this next turn, and they Extreme Speed into Illumise in order to take it out, and we can't get the Psychic Fangs into Annihilate. But now Crawdont is on the field, and Crawdont is faster, so we get to Crab Hammer into the Annihilate, and we Psychic Fangs the Dragonite, which it lives because it's multi-scale, and it gets to Scale Shot into our Metagross here, but now they just get the Scale Shot into Crawdont, but Crawdont is just barely able to live it, even if it was 5 hits, unless that last hit was a crit. So we get the Crunch into Dragonite, and that takes Dragonite out. So yeah, that's the basic gist of the Hoenn team, and honestly I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, because we haven't, as far as I can remember, we haven't gotten to do a Bulldoze Clear Body team yet, and Salamence and Metagross are like the best Pokemon to do this with, since Salamence isn't a ground type and it's a pretty fast user of Bulldoze, and Metagross is just like probably the best clear body Pokemon to pull this off with, except for maybe Dragapult. But then you have Salamence and Dragapult on the field, and those are both dragon types, so you might have to terrestrialize one of them. But also Dragapult isn't a steel type, so you don't get to activate the weakness policy, so you'd have to terrestrialize into a steel type in order to activate the weakness policy. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.